think that would be something the school would have to do. And another curious question. A couple months ago, and I believe it was facilities, stop me if it was finance, lunch trays. This topic of lunch trays were brought up in high school. And that it was to be a month's trial for new trays. And I haven't heard a report back on that. I was reminded of it in last Sunday's paper. The Urban School Food Alliance in Philadelphia was replacing 880,000 non-recyclable products that are lunch trays. And so I said, what is Radnor Township doing with theirs, and what is the cost going to be if there is a change it's going to be made? Thank you.
Hey, anybody else? Going once? Approval of the minutes? The committee people read the minutes? Everybody approves? Fantastic. So we approve the minutes. Moving on to agenda item number 1. Mr. Stutzel, Stuco, the board action agenda item.
Can we defer to the Radnor Trail since some of our guests have to leave?
They don't want to wait for the scintillating thing. All right, let's start with the trail. See them shaking their head back there. So we'll move on to the trail, folks. If you could all, I don't know how many of you can come up. Now we'll just.
Good evening. John Hosback. Township and first for the project.
Your mic is
pull up the slides?
I'm going to get it for you.
Great, thank you.
Got it.
You got it, you're on.
Alright.
Just wait for them. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. And thanks to all of you who took the time to go on the site walk. Go ahead, next slide, please. With me tonight is, of course, Jeff Crary, who you know as project manager. Joe Janos from Traffic Planning and Design is here. He's our traffic engineer on the project. A.D. Marvel's also involved in the project. They're our environmental specialists. They're not here tonight. John Hosback is our arborist. You're going to hear from him. Dan Snyder is with DVRPC. They're the agency through which we get federal money through PennDOT. So if you have questions about that funding, he can answer them for you. And then the folks from the Penn Medicine Land Development team are here. David Falcone, who of course you know, and then James Markham and Chris Potterjoy, if you have questions about that. So we'll try to be brief and to the point in the interest of time. Go through our presentation quickly, hopefully, and then if you have questions, certainly discuss anything you like. Next slide, please. So here's our agenda. We're going to go through the trees because John has another meeting. He was nice enough to come, squeeze this in. Talk about the project history. We'll do a little site tour quickly. We'll look at some typical cross sections. We'll also show you the Penn Medicine plan in relationship to the trail along King and Prussia Road. And then, of course, we'll discuss anything you would like. So, John, go ahead.
So again, I am John Hosback. I'm actually the arborist and forester for Radnor Township as well as on this project. In February, we performed a study and risk assessment of 49 trees along King and Prussia Road and along Route 30. Last night, I went out and performed another inspection of additional 62 trees. And not to bore you with all the details, but we'll give you a little rundown of the tribulations and defects that we found. A lot of it is pre and post care of the landscape amenity trees that were put in years back. We looked at some of the trees on the trail regarding improper planting, best management practices, girdling root, trunk decay, mechanical damage from either mowers, no offense, or weed whackers. And this all stemmed from just lack of best management practices and care over the years. Along Route 30, we found, can you go to the slide with the tool probably?
Sure, go. Well, these are coming
Yep.
down. Just to show you, this is the first one is in front of the bus depot, the black pine that no longer screened. This is down along King of Prussia Road, right? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So this maple tree right here actually has girdling root. You can see the center canopy structure has failed previously in a storm because of the root decay that developed from the bottom and worked its way up through the stem of the tree.
Okay,
Next slide. This is another maple. The outer portion of that photograph shows decay in a major leader that's heading west on that tree. Obviously, that tree is going to be a risk within 5 years and should be condemned at the current time. Next slide. This tree, the first tree you see in the picture, in the nicely mulched landscape, has a large decay spot in the main trunk system. We resisted grafted that tree and found out that about 75% of that decay is engulfed within the trunk parameter of that tree. The center slide shows a area of decay from mechanical damage, which was very evident during our walkthrough. Next slide.
This and that, those three pictures are all the same tree.
Correct.
That was taken down.
For simplicity here, you can see the large lead that goes out over top of the trail is totally decayed, along with the trunk system at the lower root flare. This is a tree that's currently failing, obviously, so this tree needs to be condemned, or it is a liability.
And all these trees are failing. Right now they look beautiful because they're still flowering. They're Cercis canadensis, the purple flower, but they're seeing the last years of their life, unfortunately.
Within 5 years before they need to be condemned. Same thing, another tree leaning out, trunk structures failing, root decay is all observed in these trees along the trail. Same picture, next slide, please.
That's it. So really, I mean, John, of the 110 or 11 trees you looked at, do you have a guesstimate of?
We do. It was 85% of the trees are in really bad shape. And again, it's just from lack of care, best management practice over the years. Unfortunately, this is a time where we can come in, revamp the landscape, both along King of Prussia Road and along Route 30, put in a good diversified plant palette of trees, get some great shade, some ornamental value, some good texture.
So John can answer any questions you have about specific trees or anything in general. And I should mention, we're gonna replace at least 110 trees, probably more. We're developing that plan now. We will look for a diversity of species, things that will not cause maintenance problems. We won't put tall trees under power lines. We use small trees so the power companies don't go in and massacre the trees. We will pick species that don't drop balls like the sweet gum do. So we'll look at that. John's going to look at that, and hopefully, and then you will review and come up with a nice mix of species that will, have a 60, 70, 80-year lifespan instead of a 20 or 30-year lifespan that these trees have had.
And we talked about the idea that along the bus garage route, we should have trees with some type of bushes or different options there as well. So we want to create more of a shield. So
we're going to do a 3-layer system of thinning it down to get that shrub mass with some evergreen trees as well. Thank you.
Hit the buttons down there.
Okay, so I was one of the people that was really sobered by 100 or 110 trees that we're gonna lose. And so I did go on the walk and they showed me, I guess, what this griddling is, and my concern is that that property is not gonna look the same for 40 more years if we take down 40-plus-year-old trees. So that's a concern. Like what? Yeah, and I understand replacing them, and that's wonderful. And I don't know how we make sure that happens in this arrangement, but that would be great. But just can you talk a bit about, the loss of the trees, the loss of the shade, and...
No, absolutely. I mean, it is going to be a major loss and major blow to that corridor. Working with Pete, Pete's very well, versed in replacement of the streetscape, especially along Route 30. We're going to lose a large canopy and shade coverage. I guess my only answer is, and I can work with Pete to try to get some larger species put in, some 3 to maybe 5-inch caliber stock, which will give you anywhere from 20 to 25 foot in height. But again, it's not going to replace what's going to be condemned.
And we can't do that everywhere. It would have to be strategic where we put a few larger ones in. The other thing, of course, is the larger the tree, the greater mortality rate. So we have to balance that because we don't want to put in a bunch of trees and then have many of, typical mortality rate might be 10%. If we
go 5 inches, you can get up to 25, 30%.
Yeah, so we have to be careful with that too. So there's a balance there.
And similar to your recognition as well, when I did the walk, the same thing. I had some of the same realizations. I also had the realization that in the next 1 to 5 years, whether there's a trail or not, we have trees that we're looking at replacing. So either way, there's trees that we're looking at replacing as a district that are, you know, that have been identified that we're gonna need to address in the next 5 years.
I mean, the one tulip poplar that Sitzl had to take down was about a $2,500 bill, and that didn't even cost out the stump removal or the replacement. So this project is going to take out the problem trees, get rid of the stumps, put the trees back properly. And again, a lot of the problems, especially on King Prussia Road, where the trees are planted too low.
So you talk about a 10% mortality rate with new trees, so what's
Of
the
standard
plan?
size, meaning the 2.5 to 3 inch.
Okay, so what's the plan to deal with that? Do you then go back in and put in another tree the same size as the other ones that made it, or
Yeah,
how do you?
typically on a contract like this, there'll be a guarantee period anywhere from 12 to 18 months by the contractor. So that would be standard. I should mention too, I sent an email to Tom today. Because we're in the federal process, we cannot by regulation talk about the terms of the easement. We're here to talk about only the physical design of the trail, but we have to be very careful not to talk about what could be construed as terms of the easement. We're very anxious to talk about that, but we have to wait until we have an approved PennDOT trail plan, and then we'll come in and we'll go through all those terms. So I just wanted to make sure I stated that. But yes, they would be replaced.
So my concern is more just a statement for the public that, you know, I think a lot of us are, well, I'm speaking for myself, very concerned about the trees, and I really appreciate you coming forward and giving your expertise on that.
Yes, quick, so when you say we, you mean the township can't discuss it? Or you
We
personally?
can't, as a representative of the township, I cannot discuss it with the school district.
Right.
You
okay.
could discuss it among
So
yourselves all you
we
like.
could theoretically list some things here that would be of value to us with regard to an easement agreement.
I would prefer not to, since we're here.
Okay,
Because
got it.
someone could construe that as we're part of that discussion.
All right, so you would
which
you
we're
would
strictly-
ask us not to?
We're strictly
Got it,
prohibited
thank you.
from talking about that.
I appreciate you clarifying, thank
Sure.
you.
Or you're just looking for an excuse to leave early?
Just for clarification too, the care of the trees is falls on the township,
For the guarantee period,
which is,
that's our understanding, 12 to 18 months.
Part of the easement.
But again, that's getting into conditions of the easement, which
Right,
we really don't
gotcha.
want to discuss them.
Yep.
Can you answer the question on the management of the trees along?
What Peter said, for sure during the
Yeah.
warranty period of the trees.
And I was kind of joking, but in all seriousness, if the board does feel like they want to talk a little about the easement after this part of the meeting is over, we could go back later in the agenda with our, solicitor here and talk about, because we have had easement discussions previously.
Absolutely. We're hoping we can come back and have that discussion within a couple of months. That's our hope, and then we can get into all the nitty-gritty details.
I had a question, but it wasn't about trees, so I didn't want to.
All right, well, let's just
somebody else.
focus on
Okay.
trees,
So
because
I have a sentence.
John does have to run.
As to the trees, will you be able to give, because it sounds like, I think the girdling is, the planting was done improperly, but it
That's right.
seems like a lot of the other issues were issues of maintenance. Will you be able to give us, assuming at some point we would be responsible for them, kind of care instructions for those trees, so that to the extent we are bidding out our grounds work, we can put that into an RFP as our expectations of how our grounds are
Absolutely.
managed?
We will be putting together best management practices for the management of those trees for a 10 to 15-year period.
Okay, great, that'd be great, thank you.
Can you rake them for us too?
Absolutely.
Does anybody have any more tree questions?
I just have one. I want to confirm something that you told me on the walk, that we will be netting out more trees. We will be taking away fewer than what you're putting in.
We're putting in more than we're taking.
Right, thank you for pushing that
Yes.
hard. Thank you.
And it'll be a better landscape, the whole bramble area that we were talking about that needs to be burnt out, but you can't.
That's right, yes.
Great, thank you.
So does anybody else have any other tree questions? No?
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Thank
the
you.
board.
Thank you.
So,
So just to continue with the
Next.
presentation, we'll get through this and then we can entertain any other questions. the history of the project, I mean, we just put the opening of the Radnor Trail was an important thing for this community. It was before we were involved, in 2005. Next slide, please. In 2013, the township put an RFP out to do a township-wide trail master plan. It was called the Greenways and Open Space Network Master Plan. We were fortunate enough to get that contract among a number of firms that submitted. And so that process went to 2013, 2014, 2015. The Radnor School District did participate in those meetings. We had a special focus group that just dealt with institutions. Mr. Leo Barberry, if I say his name right? Burnaby. Oh, I'm sorry. Burnaby participated. He was really helpful. So we went through that process in those over those 2 to 3 years. Next, please. And then you've been nice enough to meet with us several times since 2015. I just listed those meetings there just for your information. And then, as you know, last week we did 4 site walks. Next slide. And I just listed everybody. I hope we got everyone's name who came out. And I really do appreciate everybody coming out because it helped us understand your concerns better, looking at the physical landscape, and hopefully it was helpful to you. Next slide, please. So, in terms of the grant, there's sort of a timeline on how the township obtained the money. The TAP grant through DVRPC and PennDOT, that was awarded in the fall of 2016. We started negotiations before that, and during that period, with the 3 property owners who we need easements from: the school district, the Cornerstone HOA, and the existing University of Pennsylvania Medicine just north of the high school. So, and then we had to stop all of those once we had the money awarded because we didn't reach conclusion with anyone. So that's what I had mentioned before. The school district was nice enough, he gave us a letter just saying, look, in general, your agreement, we have to work out the details, so it's sort of an agreement to hopefully make an agreement in the future without that firm commitment. We also applied for $500,000 from DCNR, which we got in December of 16, and also $225,000 from DCED, Department of Community and Economic Development, which we got about the same time. Next slide. So then we were, our team with TP, Traffic Planning and Design, was awarded the construction contract. We got our notice to proceed a little less than a year, a little more than a year ago, yes, or a little less than a year ago, sorry. And we got the survey going. If you remember, we had a lot of questions, good questions from the school district. How big is the easement? We didn't know because we didn't have a survey, so we'll talk about that a little bit tonight. We're in the middle of a bunch of different submissions to PennDOT. We have a meeting May 8th at District 6 to go through our safety submission. You recently gave us permission to do infiltration tests so that we know how we're going to deal with stormwater for our NPDES permit, which is very important. And the bottom line is we have to finish our construction by August. Otherwise, we're in jeopardy of the project.
Construction?
August, we have to finish the drawing, excuse me, did I say construction? I beg your pardon. Thank you. I beg your pardon. So we have to finish design by August, and then if everything goes smoothly, hopefully PennDOT would bid it after the first of the year, and we would love to see construction spring, summer of 2019. So that's to be determined, but our deadline for design is August. Next slide. So the grant for all 3 funding sources involved 3 different sections. You see in sort of bright green the existing Radnor Trail, which is an off-road trail, and then up to the north we have an on-road section that's going to connect downtown Wayne, down South Wayne Ave, to the existing Radnor Trail through the little open space that I always forget the name of, whatever it is, but off of Conestoga Road. So that's one section.
West Wayne Preserve.
Yeah, West Wayne Preserve, thank you. And then the next section is the section that you're interested in. We come from the end of the Radnor Trail down Radnor Chester Road to Route 30. We cross Route 30, then we hopefully will be on the school district property, make that big L, and then up to the existing Penn Medicine facility at the corner of King of Prussia and Radnor Chester Road. And then the third section is on road. No, you can stay on that slide. The lower section. No? Go back one, I'm sorry. Where we go from just below Villanova on Ithan Avenue all the way down Ithan on an on-road section. We'll have Sharrows. We go down to Bryn Mawr Ave. We cross Bryn Mawr Ave. We go under the Blue Roof for a short section. And then we go, excuse me, on the Cornerstone HOA property, which is an old gravel road that's a sewer easement that will connect down to Marple Township. So, is that Marco, do I have it right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So, those are the three sections, so that makes up the whole project. Next slide, please. So, of course, the section that you're concerned about is the one around the high school, and you can see it sort of ringed in magenta there. And this was a document out of our application to DVRPC and PennDOT for the $1 million in funding that we eventually received. Next slide. So I'm going to take you just quickly on a pictorial tour, just to refresh your memory on a couple of points, and I'll do these quickly. Go ahead, thanks. You know, we have to replace the bus depot gate, because the gate now swings out even into the sidewalk. The trail will be wider, so you'll have a new gate there that slides. Next. As Superintendent mentioned, you know, we're going to put back screening where you once had it maybe 30 years ago, so everybody doesn't have to look at the lovely buses, and make this more attractive. Next slide. We don't have handicap ramps right now at your driveways. We're going to be putting in handicap ramps, fixing broken sidewalks, replacing broken sidewalks. We're going from a 4-foot trail, excuse me, a 4-foot sidewalk to a 10-foot trail. Right now, your sidewalks don't technically meet handicap accessibility standards. The trail, of course, will. Next. This is the intersection at Radnor Road, which is going to be improved well, we would improve it if the Penn project wasn't happening. The Penn project, if that goes forward, you'll have a new traffic light with crosswalks there, which will be a really nice improvement. Next. And then continuing down with some of the trees that are not in great shape, improving some of the sidewalks, even little things where you step off the sidewalk and there's a gully. It's an ankle twister, so try to eliminate these. We will eliminate these things. Next slide. Along the athletic field, we've had a lot of discussions with you and with staffs about that fence has to come down to do the grading. We're going to put the fence back. We're going to add trees here. And actually, the trees will be further back. Right now, they're too close to the power lines. So we are going to come back with large stature trees here, but they won't get, you know, trimmed to death when the power company comes through. Next. And then all along Route 30, it's a beaten path. It gets a lot of heavy use. Meredith told us how she often runs that route. Next slide. There's some tripping hazards. You know, we think this will be a nice improvement for safety and just for access for also the school maintenance vehicles and equipment. Next. We have an existing access drive that, of course, is going to remain. We're going to improve that. We're going to have a concrete apron at the driveway that'll be reinforced concrete, so heavy vehicles can come in. We talked about either a breakaway bollard or bollards and breakaway chains, so the public doesn't pull in there if they think it's now an entry after it gets improved. But of course, your emergency vehicles have to get in there if there's an emergency, service vehicles. So that'll also be done as part of this project. Next, please. And then we end at this corner, and we basically go along the lower part of this where we put the trail. So that's a quick tour. If you have questions, we can hit those in a minute. Next slide. And then this just shows a typical cross section of the trail. And from this is along Lancaster Avenue, and so from left to right, that tall pole is sort of a depiction of. We saw a lot of utility poles out there. We don't want to move those, of course, because it gets very expensive. So we have to have at least 2 feet of clearance from the utility pole to the edge of the trail. Then we're showing a 10-foot trail, and then at the school side of the 10-foot trail, we still need a 2-foot flat area, and then we grade down. And that hatching that you see on the right-hand side underneath the heavy black line, that's meant to represent fill, because along along the eastern half of Lancaster Ave, we're filling. We're in a fill condition, so we have to bring in fill, change the grade. We'll still have a grass slope. We'll move the fence a little closer to the field. The trees will be further away from the power lines. Our grading will not either temporarily or permanently impact any of the athletic fields. So that's a good thing, and we thought that would work when we did the concept a couple of years ago. Luckily, it turned out that way. We can do the grading and not impact your field, so sometimes you get lucky. Next slide. This is a typical section along King of Prussia Road, and if you remember, for those of you who came on the sidewalk, we have to maintain a 5-foot buffer from the cartway to the trail as a safety feature for the trail users. So mainly if you're on a bike, So if you go off the trail a little bit, you're not right into traffic. That's a AASHTO safety standard. Then we showed a 10-foot trail, and then a 2-foot flat area. So you can see in the back there, we've ghosted in to represent the existing tree that was there, and then the new tree will just be further to the right as we replace those. We're going to basically plant those along King of Prussia Road at 30 feet centers. So they have a tree every 30 feet. We'll mix species, which is good practice. So those are really the two typical cross sections. Obviously, there's little variations in places, but for the most part, that's the that's the design. It's pretty simple, really. Next slide. Now this shows your site at the bottom in relationship to what our friends at University of Pennsylvania are doing. The green trail at the bottom is the trail that we've been talking about, and their proposed development is at the top. At the center you see Radar Road, and there's going to be a new light and pedestrian crosswalks there on each corner, and also across their driveway. And then off to the right you see a trail, or I'd label it as a sidewalk, that's going to go off to the right and then across their driveway and continue on underneath the Blue Route. And there'll also be a little bridge across the stream there. That'll go under the Blue Route and get us to further along Lancaster Ave, and then we're able to go north eventually on an off-road trail all the way up to County Line Road. That's going to be a really exciting trail because that's all off-road, no vehicles. And that's another phase that the township will go after money for, hopefully in a few years. And then the other important part is you go to the left of Radar Road, there's a connection over to the SEPTA train station, which of course a lot of people go to now. And also at the far left of the slide, you see a little label that says pedestrian crosswalk. As part of their work, University of Pennsylvania is also going to put some type of a flashing beacon or something crosswalk there. You know, a lot of people cross there now all the time. So that will help connect trail to mass transit. And as their site gets populated, they're going to have a fair number of people here every day. So to make all this more integrated towards a township-wide system, this really builds on the success you had 10, 15 years ago with the Radnor Trail, and starts to really integrate it into business areas, the train stations, and it's the whole point of the trail movement in the United States. We're catching up from what Europe has done. You go to some of the European countries, they've had this stuff for years, and it's heavily used. Next slide. So that's really it. That's our presentation. This is just an aerial showing, again, the alignment of the trail schematically. Jeff's going to come up because he knows probably more details than I do about this, and we'll try to entertain any questions you have, and the other gentlemen I mentioned are here to answer any questions that you might have too. So thanks.
Take a question right now.
Yes, sir.
This has to do with King of Prussia that you showed. Can you show that cross section again, please? That's how I went there.
You had it.
No, next one.
Oh, I'm sorry, the cross section.
That
That's
one.
it.
There
we go.
Yes, sir.
That 5-foot minimum, what's in there?
This is grass. Lawn.
Okay.
Basically what's there today.
Yeah, okay. That's all my question was. The trail is going to start at, it's going to be 5 feet of grass, we'll say, and then the trail piece.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Why is it 5 feet on King of Prussia, but only 2 on 30?
Well,
It's 30s.
we do have more than 5 feet of a lot on a lot of Route
yeah.
30. The constraint there, though, if you recall from our site walk, is mainly the utility poles and the signage poles. We had some good discussion. I think Mr. Solomon said, why can't we move the trail further out between the guardrail or the Jersey barrier and the utility poles? And we just don't have enough room in places. We would love to, but so that's why we have it on the school side of the utility poles. And there we just need, because we're not next to the cartway, we need that 2 feet of clearance from a vertical obstruction. Hopefully, when we build it, it might be 2.5, 3 feet, but it's all in there. The other thing I should mention, and I'm sorry I didn't, if you could go back to that last aerial, please. And I said I was going to tell you about this. You had a lot of good questions when we started the process, like how wide is the right-of-way? And now that we have a survey, we have the trails laid out, we can tell you. On the left or the western side of Route 30, the right-of-way, the permanent right-of-way we need is between 25 and 30 feet. because of where the PennDOT right-of-way falls and the school district property falls. On the eastern or right half of Route 30, we're down to 5 to 15 feet of necessary right-of-way from the school district. So it decreases based upon how that line moves in space. And then when we get to King of Prussia Road, there are a few sections where we don't need any right-of-way. We're not on school property at all. But generally, we're about 10 feet of necessary right-of-way in terms of a permanent easement. The other thing, of course, we'll be asking for some areas where we have temporary easements, so we can construct the trail, and those areas would be repaired back, whether they're lawn or shrubs or whatever. So the good news is, and we couldn't answer this question 6 or 8 months ago, you know, we had guessed 30, 35 feet. That's only in the western side of Route 30. Everything else goes down from that, and King of Prussia is only an average of about 10.
Just want to clarify something Mike said. So the trail along Lancaster Avenue is 2 feet from the utility poles, but those utility poles are in most cases significantly more than the 5 feet from Lancaster Avenue. So it's not that the distance from the street is less than 5. They're already more than 5, and then you need to be 2 from that.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Can you refresh my memory? Does the guardrail run the entire length of Lancaster Avenue along our property?
No, it does not run the entire length. It's between there's Jersey barrier where the earth is up to it. As it goes further west, it turns into guide rail, and then as you approach your service entrance, the guide rail then ends shortly after that. So it's hard to see it because you really never take notice of it when you drive by, but it's there for most.
That section you're talking about the access road, isn't that where your plan is to sort of veer deeper into the property away from the street?
Yes, not by much. It does go in, and that's where we will go into the 30 feet easement, which is originally, since 2 years ago, that was always the design.
One of the reasons, there's a couple of reasons we want to do that, again, having a conversation with Mrs. Solomon out on the site about this, was that we have to provide best management practices for stormwater management. By coming up, this is really where the grass is, sort of where the tennis courts are. By coming up the hill a little bit, we give ourselves room downhill to build in those stormwater management facilities. They could be rain gardens, they might be soil enhancements, because we have to meet the NPDES requirements. The other thing it does is a safety concern, just like if you're on the road, you got a straight trail the whole way, you're gonna go faster. So we wanted to curve it where we could to just slow people down a little bit. So, a couple of reasons to do it.
Remember when we walked, so MS4, are you doing the MS4 stormwater or just whatever our existing stormwater is?
We are not specifically involved with the MS4 plan. However, what we do, and I don't know which township engineer, might be Pannoni or somebody else who's handling that for the township. And do you have your own MS4 plan for the school? I don't.
No, the township.
Yeah, so my point is the township may be able to take some benefits in their MS4 application from what we do here.
Okay.
We will do what we need to do to meet NPDES, but there may be some benefits to the township for the MS4.
Can I ask you a question specifically about the grant? So I remember when you came to us, it was exciting actually last year on the facilities committee, and you said the township got a $1.7 million grant. I thought that was for our project, but was that actually for all 3 of the projects that you showed us?
Yes, correct. Your section around the high school it's the most intense construction section because it's off-road. It's in the neighborhood of 600,000 roughly.
And can you just clarify for me, because I haven't seen this grant and I don't want to read a grant. If we change any part of the grant at this point, or any part of this plan, do we lose the entire grant? Can you talk a bit about that?
There's 2 things. One is if we were to make any type of a major change. This was a competitive grant application that many communities competed for. So when Radnor submitted the grant, one of the things that I think helped the township get the grant is that we were connecting to a school, which is very important for safety, obvious reasons. The other thing is we were trying to get the 2 train stations, the I guess it's the R100 and the regional rail at the top, which we're almost at that corner, so you can make the case that we made the case in the grant that we're connecting to 2 train stations. So those are both important. If any grant, I'll just talk in the abstract, if any of these grants was changed, it has to go through DVRPC, it goes back to the committee, and the committee decides whether or not to let the applicant keep the money. They may or may not. The DCNR grant is based on the TAP grant. The DCED grant is based on the TAP grant. So conceivably, if the township lost the TAP grant, they could lose all or some of the other 2 grants also. The bigger question on most, though, is the timing. We've been told, and all the consultants working on these types of grants have been told, you have to have your PSNE submission in August. If you don't, you risk losing the grant. So we are under the gun with no changes. We're working as quickly as we can. We think we're going to be okay, but it's going to be tight. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, because I think that there was, well, I mean, I'll just give a timeline of this. I think you approached the school board, what, 4.5 years ago or something about this, and different members of the board, but I think our response was, oh, that's an interesting idea, tell us more. And then last year you got the grant, and we were like, yeah, this sounds good. And then I think what happened was the Penn property, there was a decision made to develop the Penn property. And so I think that, I'll call it muddied the waters quite a bit, because then people started to think, oh, well now that enters the equation. So I needed to understand how any of that does or doesn't change the grant. So it's, yeah, whatever you can do to clarify that. It sounds to me like we will lose this grant as a township, or potentially jeopardize it if we change our plan.
Yeah, the Penn, whatever our friends at Penn do on their property adds to a more complete system. I think it's easy to get focused in on your site alone, and your site is just, it's a very important piece of the puzzle, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. What the folks at Penn do will start to build on what we do here and add to the system. It's not going to replace it, it's going to add to the system, and you know, creating this overall township system is based upon all these, and they're not inexpensive steps, but they're all small steps. So that, you know, this is a generational project, that this trail system won't be realized for probably 15, 20, or 25 years. If you remember the Philly to Valley Forge Trail, that took almost 30 years from the concept till it was completed. And now it gets, you know, very high use. You're never going to have use like that, but you're going to have very localized use, especially around these train stations, which is going to be very important. So I think there was a lot of goodwill, misunderstandings based on conversations, side conversations. I think Penn, you know, my understanding is they're just trying to be a good community member and do what they can to add to the system. And I think, you know, maybe we weren't clear enough that it wasn't a replacement, just a part of a larger system.
And my favorite question is, what are the next steps that involve the school district? Is that the easement conversation?
I think so. I mean, you know, this board can decide to take whatever action you want, or no action tonight. Our client is the township. We want to inform you. You asked us to come back from last month and have this presentation. We want to keep moving ahead. We know that it's not a done deal until that easement is in place and you sign off on it. But to get to that point, we just need to keep moving. So we want to make sure that you're fully informed. Hopefully we've answered most of your questions. If you have more questions, you're always welcome to contact their office, contact the township. We will try to address any questions you have. And please don't feel like if it's a small detail, you don't want to ask us. Please ask us. I'd rather take a couple of minutes and talk to you about it. I think, you know, the time we spent out in the field was really valuable, both hopefully for you, but also for us, because we understood better some of your concerns. I mean, last night with Mrs. Stern, I think we came up with a solution for one of her concerns that made a lot of sense, and all these little details add up to a better project. So, you know, we just want to keep moving ahead and keep you informed, and hopefully come back to you, like I said, in a few months with something that we can talk about in terms of easement terms.
So when do we talk about details about like putting a fence in, what kind of fence? Because this is gonna bring, somebody mentioned to me today, all these people coming onto the property that you anticipate with the trails, that is security issues, so, and I was on the other, the build trail today. That's why I'm sorry. And, that's fenced on both sides because of all the people, private landowners wanted that. But are we gonna, part of the trail does have the PennDOT, minimum fence on it, that's gonna be removed, but when do we come to you guys with, okay, we would like a fence along this whole thing?
Well,
and also, are you guys gonna interface with PennDOT a lot about the intersection at Radnor Road? So that, you're hooking up with their designers, so that, you don't build a trail and then they come in and say, well, we're ripping part of this out and putting it back in.
We are coordinating with Pannoni, who's spearheading that for Penn Medicine. In terms of the site security, short of fencing off the whole school, we've talked about this, our opinion as a project consultant is that we're not going to fence the whole system. I don't think you want that.
No.
And there are, like, for example, the tennis court. You just walk into the grounds there to a point. So we can have that discussion. I don't think, again, it's your call.
I was just asking what time frame, because I know you guys have to submit a design.
We know,
but is that part of this, are those details part of that design, or small?
Yeah, we know.
They are part of that?
We know we're replacing the fence at the athletic field.
Right.
We talked about the existing chain link fence that we all saw. Our suggestion was don't replace that. And last night with Mr. Stern, we talked about putting a low estate fence on the one culvert that's pretty far away from the trail, but it's a good drop. It's like 10 feet. So we think it was a good idea, and Mr. Stern brought up last night, to put a fence there. That's fine. We're going to put that in the design. We don't have to meet with the full facilities board for you to make those suggestions and for us to give you our opinion. If there are items that we disagree with, we can talk about it moving forward. But I would just say, if you have specific suggestions, whether individually or as a committee, if you want to send them to us, we'll talk to you about it. The sooner we get those, the better. And any time is fine.
I do want to say something that we talked about when we walked it. Part of that. We had talked about, and you mentioned this earlier, some places where you were considering maybe pushing it back a little closer to Route 30. Oh, you decided you're not going to do it any place? Because we talked about a couple places where that might have been something that you could do.
Part of that decision is when we get our infiltration test done, we could do our MPDS design. My instinct is that we're going to need in that one area where it goes in front of the tennis courts and we come up, that it'll be a more attractive trail and we'll be able to utilize the ground downhill for those infiltration areas. If it turns out that we don't need those, we can look at moving it closer. So we can still talk about that, but at this point we're going to proceed assuming we need that green area to do infiltration beds or a rain guard or something.
And there are existing major obstacles that make it more difficult for us to move it down. So right now, the best design that we have proposed for the last couple of years, it really is, it makes the most sense overall. And now that we know how much space we're going to need, it has become less than we originally thought. So in the grand scheme of things, it's the best design.
The other thing we're able to do with moving the trail along Route 30 a little bit is rather than just plant trees on one side of the trail, small trees, we can plant bosques so that you run or cycle through a bosque of magnolias or dogwoods or whatever the species is. So it really becomes become a nicer, I think, experience on that trail. It'll be more attractive if we move the trail a little bit as we go through there, so we can get trees on both sides. Small trees.
I actually had a couple questions that I think you answered on the tour, but I think they would be of interest to the public, so I want to ask them so they're on the record and people hear them. And then I have one that I didn't know the answer to. Do you have a preference which I do first?
No.
Okay. So would you just reiterate for people, when we talked about the space that you need, and it came up, it triggered my mind with the culvert reference, that where you're going over culverts, the amount of space you're using is different, just so people don't expect that we're suddenly building out over waterways, that you said you'll probably put in some kind of bar as a protection along the cartway?
There are two locations along King of Prussia Road. One is really just past the bus depot at the end of your property.
Right.
We have an existing culvert with a head wall, and we're only able to get an 8-foot wide trail in there, and we can't get that 5-foot buffer. So what we've done, based on AASHTO standards, is to design the 8-foot trail with a safety railing between the cartway and the trail, again, as a safety measure for the cyclist primarily, and a pedestrian, but mainly for the cyclist. We have a similar situation as we get south of that, where you can see where the trees come in at the southern part of King of Prussia Road. That's where the little creek is. We've got a similar situation there, and we have to go down to 8 feet there. So we have a similar situation at those two locations. We're permitted to go to 8 feet when you have that type of situation where you don't want to have an impact, let's say, on that waterway.
Okay, thank you, because I just think people would want to know that. We also talked, when we were on the corner, I know there were a lot of concerns, I think Mrs. Booker brought this up at the meeting the other night, about water already on Pike Field, the field that's down at the corner of King of Prussia Road and Lancaster Avenue. And I think when we talked, you had said something about being able, because we had asked, what can you do about helping with stormwater management and helping us maybe even dry out that field with what's being put in there, because there's a concern that it's going to be a little bit of a steeper grade once you build out the path. And I think you said to me that you were able to put in a permeable walkway there, some kind of permeable surface?
If needed, yes.
Okay.
Depending on the pits and the infiltration rates, we could put in that type of asphalt. It does cost more, but it does give us more wiggle room. But we're definitely not going to add water to those fields. We're by design not allowed to do that, so we're avoiding that situation.
I heard you say, I wanted you to say it so everyone else heard.
But the other thing we talked to Mr. Stitzel about, and I thought it was a good idea, and it doesn't cost us much in terms of the project, we could wrap the outer limit of that field along Lancaster, and then we turn the corner along King of Prussia Road. The water is running towards King of Prussia Road and then towards the creek, of course. But we could put in, at the limit of our construction, we could put in a trench drain that would pick up that water and direct it out. Now, I can't guarantee that's going to really improve the field, because if you're going to put drains in that field, you'd want to do a series of parallel trench drains 15 or 20 feet on center. We can't do that in the context of the project, but we can do this outer edge to pick up on a bigger event, heavy rains. It might, it might help that condition a little bit. We can't tell how much. The other thing is, if you think about the watershed, the only rain that falls on that field is between Route 30. None of the water from Route 30 goes to that field or from King of Prussia Road. So the edge is very small. Most of the watershed for the field is the field itself.
Right.
And I think there was some discussion with the school board about making that an artificial turf field, which eventually, if you could afford it, might be the best solution, because artificial turf basically has a big stone bed under it. And all the water that field would be usable 10 minutes after a huge thunderstorm. But that's a big cost.
Yeah.
Money can do it.
I'm not sold on the turf. But so I have one more question, and this wasn't one you answered on the call, or on the trail walk. And Julie kind of brought this up. Different parts of Lancaster Avenue, the ground is higher than others with relation to the barrier that's there along the road. And I guess my question is, as you're grading, is it your intention to kind of keep the highest point and then grade from there, or will you at all be lowering that and evening it out?
We're gonna.
I don't know if you have limitations based on the grant, what you can do, what's appropriate.
If there are some areas where that high point is really like a hump almost. It's like a berm, and it's pretty unsightly. But we're going to be below that for the most part, because that area is between the guide rail or the Jersey barrier and the utility pole. Okay. So once you turn the corner from King of Prussia Road to Route 30, we're a little lower than that. And again, we're filling there because there are some utilities there too that we don't want to excavate on. So we're mainly filling, and we're mainly below that.
Okay, when we walked it, one of the things that was kind of in my head was that really from a safety standpoint, I mean, you're walking or running, you aren't kind of falling off that side. But if you were biking and the trail is too high, even that barrier doesn't really create a barrier, and that's what I would, from a
That's a
safety
good
standpoint.
point, that we wouldn't want a cyclist up that high. And in some ways, and it goes back to Mrs. Solomon's comment about keeping the trail closer to the road. Part of the, even at where the trail is furthest away from the road, on a busy day, that traffic is pretty heavy, and it's pretty, obnoxious, for lack of a better word. And if we can be a little bit away from the road, it's not gonna hide the road, but it just lessens that impact. You don't feel like you're in traffic. So that's a benefit of being a little bit further away where we can, as long as we're not impacting the school fields, and that's what we're gonna be able to do.
And I just want to thank you both. I think it was really, really helpful. I know you did a number of trail walks with all of us, and it was very, well, they had to accommodate a lot of different schedules, but it was very helpful to us, I think, to be able to explain it, to understand it, but also to explain it to our neighbors who are asking about it, things like that.
Much more fun than being in the office.
So,
just quickly, I just mentioned, the other thing we talked about too is maybe some potential shade structures or something for some, that was a piece that where we're losing trees and we're losing some shade potentially down the road until they have their full growth.
Yes, and that was along King of Prussia Road, sort of on that aerial, sort of between that baseball field, that open field, I guess it's used for baseball multi-purpose. Where the shade helps people is only for morning games. If you're there for a morning game or up to noon, there's some shade there. But if it's a PM game, all the shade's in the road. So we would recommend that might be strategically where we put some of the larger trees, because it may help with the shade. The other thing I would just mention is that if we were going to do shade structures, I'm not sure that would fit within the PennDOT funding parameters, and would have to go to the township for that. The other thing is those things have to be maintained, and actually had a discussion, it might have been with Mr. Stern last night, that perhaps if you're going to do shade structures, you want to get them closer to the field where the action's happening. So we can certainly talk to you about that. It wouldn't be our recommendation. We do a lot of recreational facility design also. So I think the better bet is maybe to just strategically put some larger trees in there so that you get shade back quicker, rather than to put a structure up that you have to maintain that's pretty far away from the action.
Well, I would maintain that we wouldn't maintain it, that it would be the township's responsibility to maintain it, because they just look at the school district as a big bank of open land they can just constantly build stuff on. So I would say that would be on them, but that's a whole easement.
I think that's easement, we're not allowed to
yeah,
talk about it.
so, I'm just mindful of the time, our next committee meeting. Do we need to, are they looking for a head nod tonight? I mean, I think you guys have done, I echo Sarah, I think you guys, the time that was spent this past week kind of educating all of us and kind of getting clear on, Penn's offer was very generous when they kind of made it in the course of their land development, but it's not gonna work out in terms of the project and the parameters of the grant. So, they'll do their thing. We gave a head nod in a letter a few years ago. You guys want to keep working with, I guess, the facilities committee or whoever, Todd, to move forward. I mean, I'm comfortable supporting it. I don't know what they're looking for tonight, but I'm just.
They already have a letter.
Yeah.
They were just looking for information.
Yeah, that's all.
Tonight was just educational.
Yeah.
If there was
Okay.
any action.
I would suggest that nothing has changed as of now. I mean,
Okay.
that this was the opportunity to do it, but nothing has changed what we've already set in motion.
Okay.
And then I guess for timeline, though, when do you expect to come back to talk easement? Would it be August because the design's done?
I would hope to get back to you in July, but we're at a little bit at the mercy of the reviewers at District 6. So all I can say is we will update you every couple of weeks. How's that on the schedule, so that you know where we are. Our meeting May 8th is going to tell us a lot with PennDOT and our safety submission. So that will, we need to move as quickly as possible.
So just so you know, we don't currently have meetings in July on the calendar. We could have a special meeting, but it's not currently.
Yeah, hopefully,
scheduled for facilities.
with the prior negotiations with Mr. Rice and your solicitor, they had a preliminary agreement in place, which I think covered a lot of the things you had talked about before. Hopefully, It would be fine tuning that agreement, which again, always has said that you would have final approval on the plans. So
August might work fine.
it could, but again, we want to come in as
so-
soon as possible. Hopefully, we could work through Mr. Rice and your solicitor to do that.
Yeah, and just echo everybody, thank you. We want to thank, you for all, everybody for all the whole
Are you-
team for all their time, and Penn being here as well, and
Are you
everyone
finished?
in the township. Yeah, I assume we're wrapping up, but I just want to thank everyone for all the time.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that that we're, they're on page 8 of 10.
No,
you
their
know,
last
I mean, are
slide
you-
was thank you and questions.
Yeah, no, I think
We're done.
Well, I'd like to ask a question. Could we get a copy of this, at least the facilities committee, if not?
Yeah, the PowerPoint.
Well,
Sure, it's, if you want to copy
Oh,
that
good.
on your laptop from the thumb drive,
Done.
you're welcome to have it.
Good.
Great.
Maybe 50 years when I'm gone, it'll be worse.
Yeah,
I doubt it, but.
We'll put it in a time capsule on the
Yeah.
trail for you.
Also, I'm sorry, the thing is, we really wanted to have the sidewalk earlier, and the weather was so miserable. We didn't think we'd get anyone to come out, so part of it was we were delayed with the weather, because it's pretty bad.
This is a challenging winter.
Yeah, but thank you all for your time. Thank you for your help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, Dave.
Thank you all for coming, especially the folks who can't get stuff. Okay. So, the next thing on the agenda is the agenda action items. So,
Agenda item number 1 is we had some maintenance trucks that were done, and the security vehicle died as well. You'll also see some of our other equipment at the May board meeting that we need to, it's time to replace. They are all coming due at the same time. So if you have any questions, I can answer those, but it's pretty standard. We're trading them in, and we're going to purchase them.
is that it?
That's it for number 1.
Okay, the Tunnell field. No?
Is anybody here?
Yes, I believe so. Mr. McWilliams, I'm going to invite him to come up to the table. He is from the Radnor Wayne Little League, and he wanted to speak to us about the possibility of the installation of a scoreboard on Tunnell Field. Welcome.
And we apologize for the delay.
No problem at all. It was actually very interesting. Well, first I wanted to thank the board for letting Radnor Wayne Little League join you tonight. As was mentioned, I'm Tom McWilliams. I've been the president of Radnor Wayne Little League for about 18 months, give or take. So I'm relatively new to the job, but we have very frequent turnover because, as you can imagine, usually you go in lockstep with your children. So as your children finish, somebody else comes in with younger children to take over. I'll try to be very brief tonight, but by way of background, Radnor Wayne Little League is a nonprofit, fully volunteer organization. We serve about 800 children each year in Radnor Township, and we've done that since 1952. We provide both baseball and softball to boys and girls in the community. And that is the principal reason why I wanted to come in and talk with the board tonight about this. Our girls' facilities, our softball facilities are not quite where our boys' facilities are. And that has led to a significant drop in enrollment. While our baseball is growing, our softball tends to decline every year. We also participate as a chartered Little League International League. You can watch that on TV. That's the Little League World Series. That's put on by Little League International. So as a chartered league, we participate in Radnor as a host Little League for our district playoffs. So there are 11 local Little Leagues that come into town, baseball and softball, from ages 9 through 12 and participate in these district Little League, basically all-star games. The district guidelines have requirements and recommendations, which include various things that you're supposed to provide at the facilities, or they recommend that you provide at the facilities for both baseball and softball. So that leads me to our really question or discussion that we'd like to have with the board about Tunnell Field. Tunnell Field is our softball facility for our young ladies. And when I mentioned earlier, we have the district hosting and we have declining softball enrollment. The board, our Radnor Little League board, started to look this past winter at what can we do to address some of these problems. So we're still in an exploratory phase here, trying to come up with ideas of how to stimulate interest in softball, how to present a better face for Radnor Wayne Little League when we host Little Leagues from other areas. And to that end, one of the things that came up to improve the experience for our young ladies and to improve our facilities in the eyes of our visitors from our nearby townships was, the boys have beautiful scoreboards. We should explore getting them for our young women. And that you'd be amazed. I have a son who's 11, and I have a daughter who's 9. My wife's actually texting me updates. My daughter is playing at Tunnell Park right now. My wife is coaching in my stead, which she always loves to do. She gets very, very stressed out when she's coaching. But they're apparently doing fine, in case you're wondering. So, yes, I'm infinitely replaceable in every capacity in my life. We recently became aware of the school district's interest at Tunnell Park. As I said, we're volunteer, we're nonprofit, we're not political in any way, so we kind of have to feel our way along as to how do we ask folks what we can do and where we can do it. So when the idea arose of the possibility of scoreboards for our young women and our softball players, the way we have them for our baseball players, I reached out and spoke with Michelle, and Michelle was kind enough to relay that maybe collectively we thought it would be a good idea for me to come in, introduce this idea to the board, assess the appetite that we explore this further. As you can imagine, the entirety of our revenue is generated from the kids who play and the amount they pay us every year, so we don't have a whole lot of money. So we tend to want to kind of get our footing under us before we go too far down a path and spend too much money exploring these types of things. To that end, we're in the phase right now where we have been developing a plan of if we could do scoreboards at all. Could we afford it as an organization? Could we afford to get them installed? We didn't want to ask anybody else to do it for us. We've now, as of, and I have that with me, I think it's April 13th. As of April 13th, we have now realized that it's a little bit of a stretch, but we can probably swing it. We had hoped to do both fields for our young women. There are 2 fields there where our, we call them the majors and minors, our older girls play. We'd hope to do a scoreboard for both fields. That may not be a possibility either financially or logistically, but if we can only do one, even if we just do one at a time and then a couple of years from now, my successor does the other one, that would be great. It would be a great help. We do fully appreciate the need to avoid adversely impacting the aesthetics of the park. We understand that the community view is very important. We're not desiring to block anybody's view, to detract at all in any way from the park. This is, believe me when I say, putting the cart way before the horse. We had envisioned that probably the best situation for all parties involved, admittedly, without exploring the opinion of any party, because as I say, we're about 2 weeks into having any idea whether we can do this at all, would be to try to put either or both scoreboards at or in the tree line that is on the, if you're in the parking lot on the far right-hand side of the park, right along where the train runs, because there are no residences there. It's the train tracks and nothing else. We would probably, if we were able to, and the board would allow us to explore further, we would probably, we have one field in this corner, one field in the other corner. We'd probably have to angle a scoreboard to be able to see from this field. We would probably stay in the tree line and just go straight out to the other field. We think that would be visible enough. We've gone down the path, as I say, and just in the last 2 weeks, we completed those discussions with a scoreboard provider who came out and met with us just to look at what we were thinking, because we wanted to make sure you could see both scoreboards, what size would we have to get. Obviously, just like air conditioning and anything else. Bigger is always better and costs a lot more. So we wanted to make sure that the scoreboards we could afford were visible from both fields where we had envisioned putting them. So really, we are here tonight to ask the assembled board whether this is a path we should go down further. Again, recognizing that the school district has the interest in the land where we're envisioning these would go to minimize the impact on the community and the view of the park. As I mentioned, we are certainly happy if it is acceptable that we continue to explore this. We would want community input, and we would go down that path. But being a nonprofit volunteer organization with very minimal funds, we didn't want to get too far along before Michelle was kind enough to ask us to come in here and just get the thoughts of the board or any questions that you might have.
I don't see.
I have
we need to
I
ask
was just
that
saying,
but,
the question I was just gonna have was just, do we need to, and this is a piece, I don't know, the township requirements for, and I don't know, have you looked into or approached what the township requirements are for signage, scoreboard, electronic, non-electronic in that area?
That is why we are here. Yes, we had first gone to the township.
Okay.
And the township said the first thing you will need to do is get an agreement from the school district that you can move forward. We had updated the township with the specs on the scoreboard, how we would view the installation. They made clear that is not land that they have interest in. But from the township's perspective, everything we were discussing doing, the scoreboards were acceptable, but they wanted us to come in here before moving too far down the path.
And it's an electronic scoreboard?
Yes. They would be
Okay, and
electronic.
so the township's perspective was it's acceptable to them, but you need approval from the school
Yes, we
district.
would need, and
it's our land.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's, I don't see any downside to it.
Well, I do have a few questions. So first of all, when did you take over from Joe Hammonds? Or somebody took over from Joe?
I took over for Bill Quinn, who took over for Joe Hammonds.
So I was the treasurer for Joe, back in the day. The signs.
Thank you for volunteering, by the way.
No, it's not that. Most of the signs in the, most of the Little League signs are not electronic. I know the one at the Township Park is not, and the ones over at South Devon are not. So I'm curious why you want to go with electronic. And I'm surprised that the Township is saying yes to that because the zoning, their own zoning code on signs prohibits it. So I'm surprised you guys that they're saying yes to animated signs, and who's paying for the electricity and things like that. So technically, I think what would happen, you'd get agreement from us, and then I guess we'd sign off and give permission to you. So what did they say about the animated signs? Because those are not provided for in their own zoning.
Angie Park has two right outside the township buildings.
Right.
They have
Did
two.
they change them to electronic?
They are enormous. They are 26 by 16 electronic scoreboards. These are much smaller than that.
So they must have made those electronic because they didn't used to be, and they're new. They're electronic now. Okay. So my only comment about all of it is, yeah, there's definite zoning regulations in terms of size. You actually even are supposed to have to go to design review board and show the signs because they're considered off-premises signs, and they're animated. I would not support it at all if you guys are looking to do any advertising.
No, we would not.
And there are neighbors in that Garrett Hill community who it will very much matter to them. And so I appreciate that you're taking the time to place them in a way that's not obstructive, and I think you're right along. My daughter played softball, so I know what you're talking about over at those fields at Tunnell. But you know, don't discount how much the people in that community will care. It would be my suggestion. I am surprised about what they're telling you about that. And then I guess I would have a question for you guys. If we're putting in electronic scoreboards, would they be solar powered? How do they get lit? And who pays for that? Those would be kind of ongoing questions. And just so I'm clear, no way would I at all support any kind of advertising. I actually pretty much object to all the advertising on the Yankee Field ballpark fences. Every time I drive by, it's bothered, but I for sure wouldn't support it on school district property, and I just want to be really clear with you about that.
Understood, and for what it's worth, the Anki scoreboards also have advertising on them. They were sponsored by various companies in Radnor Township. We are gonna pay for this out of our own funds so that we're not asked to place any advertising or anything on them. In fact, the question was posed to me by our Little League board as to whether we should say Radnor Wayne Little League or Radnor School District on them, or just nothing, and we would be agreeable to whatever all parties involved thought was the best approach. Obviously, as you can imagine, they'll make a scoreboard in any flavor that you'd like to have them. As far as the utilities go, admittedly, we're early phase here, and we have not spent the money to do a utility survey to figure that out.
No, those are the questions I'm thinking you have to,
Okay.
I'm letting you know the questions that would have to be addressed. And that for me, advertising is a no-go, so thank you for taking that into consideration. Yeah, those are my only questions about it.
So I actually have kids in the major and the minor leagues, and I'm on that field 2 or 3 times a week and have been for years. So I actually noticed this year there were scoreboards there and they disappeared. And I know one of them was kind of broken and fallen apart, and I don't know whether the district took them down or whether the Little League took them down. So I appreciate, and my husband and my husband actually often notices, they don't treat the girls the same way they treat the boys. The boys have much nicer facilities, they have better scoreboards, they have better everything. And he says, we noticed the drop off too. He says it's no wonder there's a drop off in participation. That being said, I don't think an electric scoreboard makes the difference for me or for my kids. But I appreciate that some kind of scoreboard should be back there, whether or not it's electronic. I think the ease for the electronic is you can kind of control it a little better. The manual one nobody used was the problem, but it would be nice to have a scoreboard. I agree with the advertising. I'm not going to argue about that stuff. The one question for you was whether your group thought that was a better use of funds than to put in maybe a more permanent bathroom than the porta potties that are there and then get taken away back and disappear sometimes. And also, only one of the batting cages has been redone, and the other one is still just kind of a slab, and I wondered whether those might be potentially better uses of funding.
I could not agree with you more on the restrooms. I know that is an issue that the township has been giving extensive consideration, and I know the community has had vociferous thoughts on that front.
Yeah.
We, as a Little League, strenuously support permanent restrooms there. I mentioned earlier the District All-Star Game guidelines. That is part of the guidelines. We are supposed to have permanent restrooms. The only Little League field that we play regularly on for the older kids, which obviously we call them our fans for the older kids games, that does not have a restroom is Tunnell. Every boys park from age 8 all the way up has restrooms, but our older girls facility does not. So we are very, very, very much in agreement that there should be restrooms there.
And I would just say, to echo that, because I live right near there, we walk to the field. I think that neighborhood feels very disenfranchised by the township, and they're very often ignored, and I think we should make sure that we, to the extent you want to do something, I think it would be good to get input from that area of the township. I do think there may be significant concerns about a scoreboard that's electronic. I mean, one of the reasons we walk is because we know the parking is so tight there, and we want to be sensitive to the fact that, that is, some people live there, and for a lot of people it's just a recreational space, and it doesn't get treated like a residential area always.
Understood. And on the batting cage question, to be completely frank,
yeah.
I spent 4.5 hours 2 Saturdays ago there, putting those up with 2 other folks who had volunteered. And the only volunteer I have to put the second one up is myself, and I can't do it by myself. So we would.
After the meeting, if you give me your number, I'll tell my husband.
Go help.
Sign him up.
Sign him up.
Yes, we are always happy to receive
I
any
couldn't make
additional
the time
volunteers.
set, but I'll tell him to be needed.
I have just a clarifying question. What do you use for scoreboards now? Is there nothing there?
There is no longer anything there. We had rather dilapidated ones that had been abused, not by Little League folks, but they were not in good shape. So we were asked to get rid of them, and we did that. So there are no scoreboards there now. Yes. So we basically yell out the score to the girls every minute.
Are you looking at some other cheaper option to, doesn't be lit up? There are other ways to do scoreboards too. Are you looking at other options, or is this?
We are. One of the options we're exploring is portable electric scoreboards. I guess as a threshold issue, as you can imagine, with 800 families involved year to year, we receive a lot of feedback, and it is greatly appreciated. And it, to the point earlier about whether or not electric scoreboards make a difference, I can assure you, our softball parents in mass have noticed that the boys have gigantic, beautiful scoreboards, and the girls have no scoreboards at all. So part of our approach to this has been, rather than try to put in the hand ones where you hang numbers like they do at Wrigley Field for anybody who's a Cubs fan, we give the girls, at least as best we could afford, something similar to the scoreboards the boys have. Now, as I mentioned, one approach would be portable scoreboards. Those are large and heavy, and we have no place to store them on site, and it would not be the kind of thing that we could cart from our storage facility at Yankee Field, for example, over to Tunnell. So we are trying to come up with the best options we can, and as I say, we're trying to minimize the size of the approach we would take for the girls' field compared to the boys' field for a number of reasons. It's all we can afford, number one, and number two, we understand that it's much less impactful to the aesthetics of the park to put in a much smaller scoreboard than something as massive as the boys have.
Can I ask a question perhaps for the administration? Would this fall under, if such a thing were to be placed there, our policy about gifts, grants, and donations? Because, I mean, would that, if our policy doesn't cover making a contribution to a piece of property, it's to the school district or any district school, but I guess that field would fall under that?
We do own the field, so yes, this would fall under gifts, grants, and donations. That's how we've done other things in the past at other locations that are district property, but the township uses, for example, Sulpizio Gym. That's district property. It's leased to the township, but they did some improvements for bleachers in that building. So that is how we handle that as well.
Okay, so then by policy, it becomes our property, and we're responsible for the maintenance of it. Just information that might be useful to you.
Would that be something, and I don't know, I am an attorney in my day job, but the wrong kind of lawyer. I'm a patent attorney, so I know nothing of such things. But if that would be something that the Little League could come to a maintenance arrangement with the school district, that we would be happy to explore that, so that we do the maintenance at Inky Park on those scoreboards.
Right, come to an agreement like that.
Okay.
I think Meredith had a question.
Just a comment, as a former player, I appreciate the step towards creating equality between the boys and girls teams. As I watched my two brothers play Little League, and then for me to go through softball, there is a significant difference between the way that the boys and girls are treated, and I believe that it does contribute to who decides to play and who does not decide to play. And I think that like part of it too is that there's a big interest in lacrosse around here, but when I stopped playing lacrosse, I started playing softball. So I just want to thank you for this step. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
So can we, I just make a couple of things.
Oh, go ahead.
Since we actually have two Park and Recreation Board members here, it's my belief that if we give you, okay, let's see what we can do, it should go to the Park Board. Okay, that's, we on the Park Board are not being utilized the way we should be. And we did already get feedback about a new bathroom facilities that they want to put in, and apparently there's a Little League storage piece attached to that, and a concession stand. And there's a lot of talk going around Garrett Hill that there really wasn't much conversation with the neighbors about that, kind of what Sarah had said. So we want to make sure that moving forward, I would recommend, and I don't know whether we have the ability to do this, but I would recommend that you go, make sure you get an appointment to see the Parks Board, because if you do go back to the commissioners, they're going to kick it back to us, so why not be proactive and let us bring it in, and then we can have meetings at the park board with the neighbors, which we have done before on things that they're of interest with the park that we improved, Clement Park. So we would like to be on the cutting edge, because especially with girls' sports, we should make sure that we're doing what's in the best interest of all the students and all the children around here. So I would make sure that you go through Parks and Rec Board, because we will bring that back. I will bring that back to the Parks and Rec.
Chuck, hang on a second. I mean, I appreciate wanting to involve the community, but I would hate to waste Tom's time.
I'm not wasting his time. What I'm saying is this, quite frankly, we served on the Parks Board. We don't get this information. I'm hearing this as a school board member. I should be hearing this as a park board member. I'm not very happy with the process, and I'm stating right here and now, if you want this to go through, the best way to do it is to go through the Park and Recreation Board. I don't need to hear anything from anyone on this board. I'm a Park and Rec Board, and I'm telling you as a Park and Rec Board member, we're not being utilized. You come before us, I'm saying please send it to us where we can help you to get this through, and it will be done properly. Okay? That's all I'm saying. So don't get me excited on this, because the park board at our last meeting said we're at the point we can resign. We can dissolve the park board if you're not going to use us. So please use us.
Chuck, I just want to clarify, the Parks Rec Board has no purview over school district property. That's all I'm saying. So that's fine, we don't have to argue about it. That's my point.
The Park and Rec Board is where this should be going through. This is on a park. It's a park that the district rents from us.
It's not a park, it's a school district property.
They don't rent it from us? They don't have a lease from us?
No, they don't. They utilize that property, but it's
Without a
school
lease.
district property. They don't have a lease agreement.
Wow.
The only thing they have a lease agreement for that I'm aware of is Sulpizio Gym.
Right.
And the reason that Tom is here today is because he went to Radnor Township to,
No, I understand that.
to work with them.
I
And they
heard that
said
conversation.
They don't own the property. He needed to get permission
Right.
from the school
And
board.
now I
Until he
would
got
make
permission,
sure-
he
yeah.
wasn't sure that he could even move forward.
All I'm saying is now, as you move forward, that you can now go to the Park and Rec Board. And I guess I question why we don't have a lease, why we have them using our property without.
Yeah, and
I have no problem with that. I thought we did. And it goes back for quite a long time. Goes back
Put that on the
when
list.
it's still for
Yeah, no.
Put that on
the
list.
Okay, and I'm sorry if I got a little excited. It had nothing to do with you.
I appreciate that, and I should mention, by the way, to that point, for the record, I too was at the Board of Commissioners meeting for the restroom proposal. The Little League, make no mistake, we were very taken aback. Our understanding was, again, it was an attempt to equate, the boys have a snack shack, and I can tell you, if you have been to Enki Park on a Saturday, it is glorious. There are children having a blast, running, playing. It warms my heart every time I see it. And when the township had asked us for our input on that, we said, well, we understand the community does not like those the rusty old field boxes in Garrett Hill. We are happy to get rid of all that. We would love to have some place to put our stuff, which led to the storage aspect. And when the township had said, what about a snack shack for the girls, we thought that was another along the lines of these things that would stimulate interest. So I apologize on behalf of the Little League. I don't think we appreciated that. I can assure you, we have been eyeballing the next park board meeting. I think you will have a very significant turnout on behalf of Radnor Wayne Little League after what I saw at the Board of Commissioners meeting a couple weeks ago. So thank you for that.
So
I appreciate it.
from us, I think all you need is just the okay. I mean, I think it's a great idea. I don't see any downside to it. But I think from us, all you need is permission to do it, right?
I think right now,
Permission to move forward, to go to the township, to then get stuck in a year of approvals and stuff.
Yeah, I think for the board to, ask, and I think we're gonna have Todd and Michelle, to now, to look into this, basically the board is saying that, we're interested in this, to work now closely with Little League, to look at some of the details and come back and update the board on where we are with it. There sounds like there needs to be details. And I think maybe it would work out best for there to be direct conversation here with the details and what this looks like moving forward. Does that make sense with everyone?
Yes.
But I also would like to look into, if we don't have a lease, we're not charging them per use. No, so it's too fuzzy. We used to operate here through gentlemen's agreements that were, you know, a deal that not is as good as a wink to a blind man. We're past that now. So I want us to really seriously look into this.
So we have that on our list of things to look into, and we'll report back once we get everything together.
Yes, question?
Yeah, so if I may, like Sarah, I'm a Ward 7 resident, and perhaps with Sean Barley, interim township committee person, perhaps there could be a conversation that we can mediate with local residents there along the RDF about this. But I think I speak for all of us when, you know, definitely should have scoreboard parity here, for sure. So, thank you very much.
Thank you all. Any other questions? I greatly appreciate your time and input. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. You mean on my daughter's game?
Yeah, I hope your daughter's game was
The whole game,
Thank you
scoreboard.
again.
Okay, next up. Next up is the capital plan. Michelle Felsish. The microphone's still on. Yeah, Michelle.
He's cold.
Oh, nice.
In your packet, there is a board capital plan. Remember, we did review this previously in April. Since that time, this is a working document. As we move through the budget process and we start to look at things and we realize that there are some other needs, we will ask to get updated estimates, and that's what happened when we look at the changes that occurred between April and May. Those changes are highlighted in yellow, and that would indicate an increased cost for a new item that's been added to this list. And if they're highlighted in green, that would indicate a project that's been pushed to a future fiscal year. The changes occurred on Ithan. If you turn to the page that says Ithan Elementary, and we had a public question regarding that earlier in public comment, you can see that there's 3 highlighted items in the amount of $380,000 each, and that's for roof replacement at Ithan. I'll let Mr. Stinson talk about that a little bit. He's the one who's been the lead on the roofing at Ithan Elementary.
So when Leo left, I got a box from him, a file folder, but this is what we should be looking at. And in the capital plan, there was an amount in there for the roof at Ithan. My understanding is that there was a third done, and we needed to do 2 more thirds of it. And in my experiences with ops and my other experiences, it seemed a little light for the dollar amount listed there. So I actually had a gentleman come out who did the original third and said, can you give me an estimate to finish the roof just so we know where we're at? That estimate came back at $1.4 million. We have some time. It's not that it's a dire need that we need to do everything this year. There is, we do have 3 to 5 years to do it. Obviously, if we would do some sections together, it would be a little cheaper for us because we wouldn't have to bring the roofers back out. But in talking to Michelle, we just decided that we wanted to make the board aware that it is something that we're going to have to deal with down the road. And we decided we were going to put it out in the 3 years and put it evenly within those 3 years.
Lifespan of the roofs at 30, 40?
I believe the quote we have is, or not the quote, but the estimate, he would be looking at a 40-year. Don't hold me to that, I don't have it in front of me.
So that's something that should come out of the capital fund because it's not recurring.
It makes
At least in our time.
It makes sense to pay for it out of the capital fund. That's where we paid for roofing repairs in the past and re-roofing sections. Ithan has a flat roof. Those are much more difficult to maintain, especially where they're seamed. they can have leakage, so you need to have them looked at periodically to see if they need some refreshing in between the time when you replace them. The next area where there were substantial changes is on the high school page. And you'll notice, if you look at the turn to the high school page, there is a lot of green and there's a lot of yellow. And we've actually been looking at capital planning in our CAC meetings, and the CAC committee has actually taken on capital planning and is going to be making some suggestions about how we can improve this document and improve our process. So hopefully that will be done and completed and brought forward to the finance committee at the June 5th committee meeting. So when we look at this plan for the high school, the first items is replacing the main PA system and installing a Primex system. They're highlighted in green right here. Those were actually pushed. Those had been in 18-19, and we moved them to 19-20. That's a result of additional meetings that we've had with Mr. Bechtold and some of the staff up at the high school, as well as some of the maintenance men. In regards to the paving, there had been $40,000 in paving. That was in, I believe, 19-20. We just split that into 20 and 21 and moved the $40,000 that had been in 2021 to 21-22. So there's no additional money in those items that are highlighted in green. The projects have just been pushed to an additional area or additional year. The next item highlighted in yellow is the wrestling mats. Upon review of the wrestling mats that we just finished purchasing for the middle school and the lift, we decided to increase the amount that had previously been put in this line item. I believe it was either 30 or 35,000. We think that those wrestling mat replacements and lift and engineering costs will be closer to $40,000. In regards to the carpet at the library, we had talked about this earlier, and I think we talked about it when we looked at this in April. This had actually been split between 2 fiscal years. We wanted to put that together so we could replace all of the carpet at one time. We think that will be more cost effective and will better suit the needs of the high school. Auditorium upgrades. These are some additional items. We did have some auditorium upgrades on the previous capital plan, but we did receive revised estimates, and so we've made some changes here. We just got the $110,000. We are still trying to get a revised estimate on that, and so that stage rigging, I'm sorry, it's not stage rigging in the auditorium, it's some other items. Band shells. That will possibly be adjusted when we move to approve this at the final budget. The $20,000, the swim blocks, those are a new item. We did know that the swim blocks were getting to be in poor condition, but we do need to replace those we're looking to do that in 19-20. And then, I'm sorry, 18-19. And then the gym backboards, we're replacing the sideboards. That is a new item. Fencing and backdrops, that's based on a revised estimate that Mr. Stitzel had received on fencing, so that is actually going to cost more than we had originally estimated. In
Can
regards,
I just ask where that fencing
It's various. It's some of the softball fields and the JV baseball field as well.
is? Okay, so it doesn't contemplate anything related to the trail?
No.
Any changes people talked about? Okay.
and then under the field renovations, the $48,000, that is looking to replace some items on the field, and the $600,000 is the replacement of the turf field, and that would be Prevost Field. We are looking to do that in 19-20. We're also looking to possibility of moving the track resurfacing. I think we did move it to that same year, so those two projects would be completed at the same time. And we did speak about that previously. We think that makes a lot of sense to do the track resurfacing as well as the replacement of the field, all in the same fiscal year. And they might not be in the same fiscal year, and if that is the case, we will look at that and move it. But this, again, is a working document. We continue to have conversations, and it doesn't become final until we approve the budget. And once we even approve the budget, we're still working with this document. So it's not something that we present to you and this is exactly what's going to happen. It depends on what occurs when we review the projects as we move forward. And then there's some installation of some mirrors in the fitness room that Mr. Bechtold requested. We also had a question earlier about the generator out at the transportation facility. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, I actually just received a third quote on my desk last week, so we will be reviewing those, maintenance guys and myself, in the next week or two. So that generator will be installed by the end of fiscal year.
Can I ask a question before you go to the summary? Just let me know.
Sure.
And also, as far as the bleachers, because that's been a topic on Capitol, we will have all repairs and painting done by Memorial Day, and then the inspection of the bleachers will happen the week of Memorial Day, to make sure everything we've done is sound and we're ready to go for next season.
Thank you.
Okay, so, and this is kind of along Sarah's wishful thinking list for on the transportation facility. Paving, would that happen to be anything that's going to be covered by the trail? You see the $40,000 for paving?
I do not believe it's anything that's going to be covered by the trail. It's along the back fence wall, and it's patch paving. It's not repaving the entire parking lot. They will do something with the apron where that gate is more than likely, but we're not 100% certain of that. And the replacement of the gate will be an added bonus for out of the transportation area because it will be.
It'll be a sliding gate that I talked to Peter, we'd like to have that on the electronic system like we do with the other gate. So we have the keypad or the remote that when our drivers come up to it, it'll open automatically.
So it doesn't have to manually be opened like the one we currently have. So on the summary page, you can see our capital improvements have increased significantly from over what we previously looked at. A large amount of that is due to the roof at Ithan. So previously we had looked at around $300 and some thousand being needed to complete the 18-19 requested projects. Now we're looking at $795,795. Again, we'll continue to review these and present information regarding how the district can fund those projects when we approve the final budget.
Just only because it segues right into the next meeting, which technically, given the time, this could be the finance meeting. Michelle, could you just give us, if you have it with you, how much we have in our capital fund, so that we have context for, you're basically requesting this 790. You're short the 795, but what's in our capital fund that we could be considering allocating for these projects?
So you're talking about what's in the general fund in the fund balance?
Yes.
Okay, so we do take into account what money is in the capital fund for projects that have been previously completed and money that has not been used. That is the $1.5 million that you see on the summary page. But in our general fund balance reserved for capital projects, there's just under $7 million. It's $6.9 million and some change.
So this is about a little less than 15% of that.
Correct, and it will likely change before we do the final budget.
Okay.
Through the final budget.
Any questions for anyone else on the? All right, thank you. Moving on, new business, seeing none, public comment.
Hi. Public comment? There was a public comment by email paper there.
Oh, really?
Oh. This is from Gail Morrison.
You just turned your
I
mic
turned it off. From Gail Morrison. Good afternoon. I'm writing today as public comment to urge the school board to move forward with a plan to connect the Radnor Trail to the RHS campus in keeping with the Township Trail Master Plan and preserving the grant money at stake to build it. As I have commented to RTSD for a couple of years now, the trail and walkways to and around the campus are greatly needed and will benefit students, families, and relieve traffic in the area. A safe route for students and others from all of South and West Lane to the campus by foot or bike would be a tremendous asset. I do not believe the plan should be jeopardized for some aged trees. These can be replaced with more resilient specimens that have deeper root systems that do not damage sidewalks. The exercise and training uses for students on campus and residents year-round will be improved as well. I hope the board proceeds without delay to build trail and walkways, Gail Morrison, 111 Poplar Avenue, Wayne.
Thank you. Sure.
Hi, just a few quick things related to the trail. What I heard was there's going to be a fair number of people using the trail, and as I mentioned in the beginning, the Penn site is, well, I didn't actually mention it, has 4-story office buildings, 2 parking garages, a hotel, other uses. So I do think that the school district has to really reflect on managing the traffic in that area, and maybe, I mean, what I heard was that Penn really wants to have an important role in enhancing this. And I can't blame Penn to be across the street from your development and have a fabulous trail that your employees will be able to walk and the people that are going to your site will be able to use. That's a tremendous benefit. I don't know how Penn is planning to enhance it, but I'm really interested in hearing the different ways they're going to be. Because for some reason I thought for a while there was consideration of putting the trail on their side of the road. I wondered about the roofing. Do we have competitive bids for that roof? I heard that the one roofer had put 1/3 of it on, and it's an expensive roof, so I think it's really important to have competitive bids. Thank you.
Ms. Burke?
Yes, the other thing is maintenance of the trail, the cost projected for that, and the rain gardens and everything else that are contemplated.
Ms. Burke?
That last question, is the school's maintaining the trail because it's on school property? Big question. Once again, and it was stated almost verbatim, the individuals who were here to give us the presentation this evening, their client is the township. A lot of the responsibilities, security responsibility, maintaining responsibility. In other words, they're the township, but the trail is going on the school district property. Correct. And that was the nod, that was the head nod that you all gave them?
Because we haven't negotiated the easement.
Well, that was his comment was that it may not be final. That was their comment that their client is the township.
To be determined. You know, I'm sorry.
Isn't that what I heard?
It is an easement to be determined.
Okay.
So it wasn't so hard to answer.
Thank you. And the other question, again, as we bring up properties that the school district owns, why does the school district own property, the Tunnell fields? Right, schools, that's another one of our fields that the school district owns, and no compensation from the township is being paid to the school district. Thank you.
Okay, anything else for anyone? Nope. Okay, we're adjourned.
Do we need a break before we start the next meeting?
Okay, guys, we can have a break, but